2 U.S. Navy SEALs drowned in the Red Sea last year as they boarded a ship looking to interdict Iranian-made weapons. But is the investigation actually just a huge cover-up to protect Navy command? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about this strange story. Okay, so this relates to, of course, the drowning deaths of 2 U.S. Navy SEALs that took place in January of actually this year, about 10 months ago. And the investigation by the Navy, well, it's pretty annoying. One, it uncovers allegations of performance-enhancing drugs, unauthorized surgery, and drinking, all things that would be off limits to a sailor. Now, the Navy, though, conducted their own investigation, and it really drives me crazy because it seems to pawn off responsibility as far down the totem pole as you can get. In fact, going so far as to blame the SEALs themselves for drowning. Now, I'm just going to show you this, guys, because this is one of those things that you just have to see it to believe it, right? Now, here is the actual investigation. Now, I want you to join me in taking a look. So this is the cover page, and this is the memorandum of the opinion of the U.S. Naval Forces Central Command. This is by a U.S. Army General Michael E. Carita. And this is this is fascinating. So he gets the investigation. Now, he did not perform the investigation. He asked another senior officer to do it, who did all the interviews, who compiled the evidence, and drew independent conclusions. And then he comes in and says, yeah, I agree with everything you say. I've reviewed the subject investigation and concur with the findings of fact, opinions, and recommendations as modified, with the exception of recommendations, paragraph 13. And he says, I hereby change paragraph 13 to as follows. And listen to what he says. He says that the incident was marked by systemic issues and was preventable. But he says, neither the mission as assigned, the command and control structure, or operating near or at the threshold of environmental conditions, or the decision to accelerate the mission 12 hours earlier than expected were causal to what he calls a tragic mishap, right? And then he says, despite conflicting guidance on buoyancy standards, no guidance suggests negative buoyancy is necessary for VBSS missions. This is shipboarding missions. And he says, the negative buoyancy was the root cause of the deaths, right? He says that the SEALs didn't know they were negatively buoyant. By the way, guys, for negatively buoyant just means would sink if thrown in water. Says the SEALs may not have known they would sink if they were thrown in water, as buoyancy tests occurred in the first months of the deployment, or they acknowledged that they would likely not float, and that they would be okay after shedding tactical gear and supplementing with an emergency flotation device, right? They say boarding vessels is one of the most hazardous phases of the operation. And he says, then here's the part that really irks me. He says, however, a layered defense of personal responsibility, properly maintained and functional equipment, which, by the way, in this case, he means is there also the responsibility of the SEAL, and processes and procedures to safeguard against such a hazard. He says other layers of defense, like pre-mission buddy checks or buoyancy tests, help provide a forceful backup in the instance where individual responsibility misses the mark, right? In this instance, that forceful backup may have fallen short of naval special warfare operation expectations, and commanders are best suited to determine what degree of responsibility to assign the echelons above. This is what bothers me, is that finally, in the final assessment, he says, you know who's really at fault? A lack of personal responsibility. Now, this annoys me because when you are this level of commander, he didn't do the interviews, he didn't review the evidence, he just read the report. But he decided, though the report must get it wrong, it's actually the individual responsibility of the SEALs for making sure that their gear allows them to float in this very dangerous boarding process. The commands never did anything wrong by asking them to do this mission. Nothing in this mission is the fault of commanders, and it's all the fault of the SEALs. And that is what really irks me, is that he literally signed off saying that nothing command did was wrong. every mistake was made by the Navy SEALs. Then therefore, how is it preventable, right? And then you can see the subordinate commander, right? GM Wyckoff reviews, concurs, right? He modifies the opinion of the investigator, which you gotta love. You gotta love when someone comes in and modifies an investigator's opinion. Bro, it's not yours to modify, boss, big GM, right? And he says, right, he rewrites the opinion to say it was preventable. At or near threshold conditions were not causal to this terrible mishap. By the way, these are the 8-foot swells that the SEALs were trying to get past to board the ship. But they were a contributing factor, right? And this is really annoying. This is just so annoying. And then we're going to take a look at some other crazy allegations that came out in the course of this that the Navy appears to be burying. But here's what irks me. Here's the summary of events that they found, essentially. Right? Summarized by the Navy Times. So the team, the SEAL team, was in 6 to 8 foot seas. That means they're talking about 8 feet of difference between the top of swells and the bottom. These are really rough conditions. And they said the vessel they were boarding was rolling in the waves. Conditions, it says, were well within their abilities, right? But literally it wasn't, because they fell off the boat and drowned, right? They said as time went on, the rolling increased, and Chambers tried to board the ship by jumping from his craft's engine compartment to the top rail of the ship they were boarding. Now, bear in mind, guys, likely the ships were doing this, so your timing has to be pretty good. They said some of the SEALs used an attachable ladder, but because of the waves, others jumped to the top rail, which they said was within reach but slippery. Chambers' hand slipped off the rail, and he fell 9 feet into the water. Based on video of the mission, he was able to grab the lower rung of a boarding ladder, and when he tried to get back onto the craft, he was swept under by another huge wave. Again, these conditions sound wild. 11 seconds after he fell in, Ingram jumped in, and for at least 10 seconds, video shows they were above the water intermittently at times, and were able to grab a ladder extension that was submerged. But both were knocked about by the waves. Last sighting of Chambers was 26 seconds after he fell. Ingram tried to climb back on the ladder, but was overcome by a wave. He tried to deploy his flotation device, but within 2 seconds, an unattached water wing was seen floating about a foot away from him. So somehow, the flotation device became undone. He also seemed to try to remove some of his equipment, but he slipped underwater and was not seen again. Both, of course, were wearing body armor, which you guys know is... right? Both were wearing body armor. Ingram had radio equipment that adds up to 40 pounds, and those flotation devices are meant to lift a minimum of 40 pounds in seawater. So you're talking about gear that at best would have offset some of the additional gear he was carrying. That's not to say anything about a rifle, magazines, ammunition, night vision devices, helmets. So they could have been weighed down by as much as 80 pounds of gear, right? Of course, the report said members of the SEAL team expressed shock and disbelief that Chambers, their strongest swimmer, could not stay at the surface. The report concluded that there was conflicting guidance on flotation devices, and it was left up to individuals to figure out their buoyancy needs, right? And, of course, some SEAL team members told the investigators that the foam inserts that make the emergency flotation device a little more buoyant are bulky, and it becomes difficult to climb or crawl, right? SEAL team members began prompt man overboard procedures within seconds. There were helicopters, but it was called off in 10 days. Now, here's what aggravates me. First off, is that one, command sat there and said, obviously, if you read that summary, how can you not draw the conclusion that the conditions the SEALs were operating in were a direct cause of them drowning, right? Presumably, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if you're a Navy SEAL, you probably wouldn't drown if there wasn't 8-foot stinking waves, right? And the command said, listen, the mission as assigned was fine, which I want to point out that there are a lot of potential alternatives that are available, right? And what are they? Well, the SEALs can wait 4, 5, 6 hours on standby, perhaps. Could they have used inserted via helicopter? Could they have simply called off the mission and tried to interdict the vessel at a later point in its journey? Could they have ordered the vessel to simply stand down and surrounded it, blocking it for several hours, right? All of these options might have been available to commanders, right? Now, the SEAL team gets the mission, and at the team level, they say, yeah, we'll figure out how to do it. But it's up to the commanders to look at the whole picture and say, is this mission worth risking my SEALs' lives? And the fact that the commander of the Navy stepped in and said, it's not command's fault, it is solely personal responsibility that caused it, is the Navy covering its ass. I don't know what else to tell you, right? And this bothers me. I mean, it bothers me for a host of reasons. And the buoyancy issue, again, to me, is a little bit of a red herring. Because, yeah, these guys ended up in the water. And they ended up in the water by doing some kind of kooky stuff trying to board this vessel. Again, jumping off the vessel onto the other one while it's doing this just shows a really huge appetite for risk. And I get it. They're SEALs. And you want SEALs that get the job done in tough conditions. But commanders have a responsibility to deploy SEALs on missions where their advantages are overwhelming, right? And frankly, trying to board a hostile vessel in these conditions, the crew of the Dow itself, it says, weren't mounting any resistance. They were not trying to combat the SEALs in any way, shape, or form. But now you got to ask yourself, what if they had? What if there was a contingent of armed guards from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps on board, right? Not unreasonable. What if there were just Somali pirates who had some armed stuff on board and decided to go out with a fight? Imagine how disastrous things could have been in that environment. And so that, I think it's important to acknowledge that the commanders did bear some responsibility in this. But here's the other thing. There was also a pretty troubling cultural problem, right? And that actually appears way down in the report. Let's pull it up here for a sec. Let's go to page 69. LOL, LOL, LOL. Right? Nope. There we go. There's interesting. There were other investigations. An anonymous complainant said, hey guys, there was a fundamental cultural problem here. And there were 3 other allegations that said the SEALs were drinking on board the ship. It says that one of the SEALs was on steroids and that one of the SEALs had actually had a surgery performed by a non-DOD physician in Bahrain. And this is where things go kind of sideways. And this is where things drive me a little crazy. The investigator was like, nobody used performance-enhancing drugs, but one of the SEALs did get a prescription for TRT. Lads, I'm here to tell you that if you get a prescription for TRT and you're a 37-year-old Navy SEAL, it's fake. I don't know what else to tell you. This is bullshit. Okay? A man with actual need of testosterone replacement therapy, like this is a real therapy. It's reserved for people who, for example, have damage to their testes from a combat injury, right? Someone who has cancer who can't produce enough natural testosterone. And a tiny number of people may allegedly can get it through things like very, very intense weight cutting, for example, in some sports like Olympic wrestling. But even that is unbelievably rare. But TRT is now used and sold off-label as a catch-all for people who want legal drugs. That's it. They want to get on performance-enhancing drugs. They want supplemental testosterone. It makes you jacked. No doubt about it. It makes you jacked, and it lets you perform at a high level after, again, into older years. And I get it. I'm 37 too, the same age as Chambers when he passed. And so I feel it. Yeah. I can't keep up with 27-year-olds in the gym. They can just do more rounds. They're faster. They're better. But the difference is I rely on my experience to let me do that, and just hard work and a commitment to being more physically fit and not cutting corners. But here's the thing. The SEAL, and it's anonymous, which SEAL was on TRT. Again, my theories are my theories. But if you're on TRT, right, they acknowledge that they went to a civilian doctor in San Diego, and the only time the SEAL outed the fact that he was on TRT, according to the report, is when the Navy SEALs implemented a mandatory drug test. And that's when he went to his doctor and said, hey, heads up, I have a prescription from a civilian doctor for testosterone replacement therapy. If he really needed testosterone replacement therapy, why did he have to pay out of pocket for it with a civilian doctor? Why could he have not gotten it from his personal physician as a SEAL? There are SEAL-only physicians, guys. There are SEAL-only psychologists, okay? So he had access to Navy medicine, but somehow he needed a civilian doctor to give him this prescription. And again, as they point out, needing TRT, because of the reasons I told you, is medically disqualifying for special operators and requires a waiver. But the physician said, listen, you're already on TRT, buddy. So we are going to keep you on it while you're deployed. And then when you come back, we're going to titrate you off of it. Seems to be what was done. Now, again, guys, if you know anything, if you listen to any of Derek from More Plates, More Dates, you'll know that TRT is not it's not an aspirin, guys. It changes the hormonal balance of your body. And again, we talk about the fact that you get older, you get some advantages, you get some wisdom, and you can use that to offset the fact that it's a little harder to recover. You're going to lose some cardio. But when you start pumping yourself full of sex hormones, you change aspects of your disposition. You can. Not everybody says it, but man, a lot of guys do. And you wonder about the fact that they pawn it off on individual responsibility, but then you add SEALs who are known to be taking steroids. Sorry, that's what they are doing. And the fact that the investigation plays this little dumb game of, oh, it wasn't steroids, it was just a regular, again, the SEAL is not named, but a regular 30-something Navy SEAL just getting on casual steroids from a civilian doctor, by the way, paying out of pocket for a medical condition that totally is real, 100% real, but you can't have the Navy detect it. This is insufferable. The other allegation was that one of the SEALs was actually not fit to conduct operations because he had an unauthorized medical procedure in Bahrain prior to embarkation. Now, Naval Branch Health Clinic in Bahrain is limited in scope of services, and that this local civilian section supplements all other medical services, including emergency care. It then provides a bunch of redactions, and it says that actually the team were aware of the procedure and required follow-on care. So it's possible that it was some kind of emergency surgery. And it says that the surgeon for Commander Naval Amphibious Task Force provided an independent assessment of blank medical care specific to the medical procedure diagnosed and treated 26 November and the subsequent follow-on care received from blank. And then it redacts it. So it says to me, this looks to me like their unauthorized surgery was that one of the SEALs got hurt on shore leave doing something that they probably are a little embarrassed about. They had to go get it treated, like a broken nose in a bar fight, for example. That would be a quintessential example. You break your nose in a bar fight, you got to go, You got to get it fixed up. You go to Bahrain, you have an ENT there, fix up your nose, and then you got to have some follow-on care. You got to keep a nose cast on. And they say, listen, I didn't have time. All right. I thought it was an emergency. I got hit in the head. I had to go to the hospital. So I got treated right away. That is not exceptional, right? The PED use, yeah, it is PEDs. It's performance enhancing drugs. Testosterone, injectable testosterone is a drug used to improve performance. Now, the final allegation is about drinking. See if we can find it here. And yes, they did indeed have, they confirmed that they had a toast to honor their fallen guys when they ended the search and declared them killed in action. But the question that the reporter raised and then got stonewalled on was, where'd you get a bottle of liquor? Whose bottle was it? And everyone claimed they couldn't remember. And again, I don't begrudge people having a bottle on deployment. We didn't. But that's because we held ourselves to a high standard. But it's worth pointing out that if you have a culture that does these things, you have a culture that says, it's not a big deal to have a bottle on board. You want to get on PEDs? Sure. And the rules are flexible. But when you have all these things, do you think that could contribute to a culture also where, those flotation devices, I'm a strong swimmer. I'll be fine. And that sort of stuff, man, that culture of, we'll be all right. Right? Combine that, again, potentially with a SEAL who's on TRT, someone who might not be able to assess risk in the same sort of dispassionate way, makes you worried. Makes you wonder if there's more to it. But again, Navy Command, they didn't do the investigation, but they stepped in and said, no, it's the individual SEAL's fault. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Thank you for joining me on this rant. Hit that subscribe button if you appreciate this content. And thanks to guys like Bill Collier, Robert Colburn, Gaius Marning, Gina Cuesta, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Carius, L90, Petra Toro, and the other lieutenant, and all the folks who support me over on combatvetnews.com. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.